Don't move, my ex is watching.
My CO suddenly dropped onto my lap like we were a couple, her arms locking around my neck as she whispered into my ear, "Don't move. My ex is watching me, and he's not alone." My heart hammered against my ribs. Just a few feet away, my young daughter Clara was playing in the sand, completely unaware that her father had just become a human shield for the most powerful woman in Texas. I looked up and saw him, Lucas Cole, standing by the dunes with two massive men in suits who clearly weren't here for vacation. My name is Andres Moat. I'm 29, and for the last 3 years, I've lived a very quiet life. Since my wife passed away, I've focused only on two things: being a good dad and my boring job as a marketing specialist. I followed the same routine every day because it was safe. I thought that as long as I stayed invisible, nothing else could ever hurt us. But as Erica Shorter, my Ice Queen boss, shivered against me, I realized my peaceful life was over. She wasn't just hiding from an ex-boyfriend. She was running for her life, and she had just pulled me and my daughter into the middle of the fight. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world you are tuning in from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. The heat of the Texas sun was intense, but Erica's skin felt cold against mine. I sat there, frozen on my beach towel, feeling the weight of her body and the sheer desperation in her grip. To anyone else on the beach, we looked like two lovers sharing a private moment. But I could feel her heart racing just as fast as mine. I forced myself to keep my hands on her waist, trying to look natural, while my eyes stayed fixed on Clara. She was only 5 years old, humming a song to herself while she piled wet sand into a bucket. The contrast between her innocence and the danger standing 50 yards away made my stomach turn. I looked toward the dunes again, squinting against the glare of the Gulf. Lucas Cole didn't look like a typical villain. He was tall, dressed in a linen shirt that probably cost more than my car, and held a pair of expensive sunglasses in his hand. But the men with him were different. They stood with their feet apart, hands folded in front of them, scanning the crowd like they were looking for a target. These weren't just friends. They were hired help. I knew that look because I used to see it in the mirror back when I wore a uniform and carried a rifle for the government. Erica leaned her head against my shoulder, hiding her face from their view. She smelled like expensive jasmine and salt. She told me in a shaky whisper that she had been trying to get away from him for months. She said Lucas was obsessed with control and that he was terrified of what she knew about his company's secrets. I realized then that this wasn't just a messy breakup. This was a hunt. I told her to stay calm. I kept my voice low and steady, the way I use it during briefings. I told her we were going to wait them out. For 20 minutes, we sat in that awkward, intimate position. My legs started going numb and the sand was burning my feet, but I didn't move an inch. I watched Lucas. He was frustrated. He kept checking his phone and pointing toward the parking lot. He didn't seem sure the woman on my lap was actually his ex-girlfriend or just some random tourist. The Ice Queen CEO he knew would never be seen sitting on a stranger's lap at a public beach. That was our only advantage. Finally, after what felt like hours, Lucas gestured to his men. They turned around and started walking back toward a line of black SUVs parked near the boardwalk. I didn't let go of Erica until their brake lights disappeared into the distance. When she finally stood up, she looked like she was about to collapse. The powerful woman who ran our Monday morning meetings with an iron fist was gone. In her place was a woman who looked small and broken. She smoothed out her sundress with trembling hands and apologized to me over and over. She said she shouldn't have involved me, especially with my daughter right there. I stood up and brushed the sand off my shorts. I looked at Clara, who was now running toward the water to rinse her bucket. I felt a surge of protectiveness that I hadn't felt in years. I told Erica that it was too late for apologies. Lucas had seen me. He had seen my face. And more importantly, he might have seen Clara. Erica told me the truth then. She had found evidence that Lucas was using his tech company to spy on government officials, and that he was planning to sell that data to the highest bidder. She was the only one with the encryption keys to stop him. That was why he was following her. That was why he had men in suits following him on a Saturday morning. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the exhaustion in her eyes. Since my wife died, I had stayed away from everyone's problems. I lived in a bubble. But looking at Erica, I knew I couldn't just walk away and go back to my boring life. If I let her walk away alone, Lucas would catch her. And if he caught her, he'd eventually come for the man she was seen with on the beach to make sure I didn't know anything. I told her we needed to leave immediately. I didn't ask her if she wanted to. I just told her. I called Clara over, trying to keep my voice cheerful so she wouldn't get scared. I told her we were going on a surprise adventure and that my friend Erica was coming with us. Clara, always happy for a new friend, grabbed Erica's hand and started telling her all about the seashell she had found. We walked quickly toward my old truck. I kept my eyes moving, checking every car and every person we passed. My old training was screaming at me to get to a safe place. Erica stayed close to me, her eyes darting around like a trapped animal. We got into the truck, and I locked the doors the second the last one shut. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I saw a silver sedan pull out 2 cars behind us. It didn't have a front plate. I didn't tell Erica, and I certainly didn't tell Clara. I just gripped the steering wheel a little tighter and headed toward the highway. Erica sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window. She asked me where we were going. I told her I had a small place out in the hill country, a house my wife's family used for hunting. It was off the grid, surrounded by miles of trees, and hard to find if you didn't know the back roads. It was the only place I could think of where we could disappear for a few days. The drive was long and quiet. Clara fell asleep in the back seat, her head leaning against her car seat. Erica finally started to relax a little as the city skyline of the coast faded away and was replaced by the rolling hills and scrub brush of central Texas. She started talking about her life, about how she had worked so hard to become CO, only to realize she had built a golden cage for herself. She talked about how Lucas had slowly isolated her from her friends and family until he was the only thing she had left. I listened, but I mostly watched the rearview mirror. The silver sedan stayed back there for a while, but eventually it took a different exit. I didn't relax, though. I knew Lucas Cole wouldn't give up that easily. He had money, he had power, and he had a bruised ego. By the time we reached the dirt road leading to the ranch, the sun was starting to set, painting the Texas sky in shades of deep orange and purple. The house was an old stone building with a wide porch and heavy wooden doors. It wasn't fancy, but it was solid. I carried a sleeping Clara inside and put her to bed in one of the back rooms. When I came back out to the kitchen, Erica was standing by the window, looking out into the dark woods. She looked at me and asked why a marketing specialist knew how to spot professionals on a beach. I told her the truth, that before I was a dad and a widower, I spent 4 years in the special units team. I told her I had spent my life trying to forget that part of me. But today, I realized that some things you never truly leave behind. She walked over to me and thanked me for saving her. For a moment, we stood in the quiet kitchen, the only sound being the wind whistling through the oaks outside. The Ice Queen was gone, and the single dad who lived in the show was gone. We were just 2 people who were tired of being afraid. I told her she should get some sleep. We had a long day ahead of us, and I needed to spend the night securing the house. I could see the storm clouds gathering on the horizon, and I knew that Lucas Cole wasn't far behind them. The quiet life I had fought so hard to keep for Clara was over. The war had come to my doorstep, and this time I wasn't going to run. I was going to finish it. The night at the ranch was thick with a silence that most city people would find haunting, but to me, it felt like an old friend. After I made sure Erica was settled in the guest room, I didn't go to sleep. I couldn't. My mind was back in a mode I hadn't used since before my wife, Sarah, died. It was a mindset of a man who looked at every window as an entry point and every shadow as a potential threat. I spent the first few hours moving through the house in the dark. I didn't turn on any lights. I didn't want anyone outside to know exactly where I was. I checked the locks on the heavy oak doors and made sure the shutters were bolted from the inside. This house was built in the 50s by Sarah's grandfather. It was made of solid limestone and thick timber. It was probably the safest place in this part of Texas. But even a fortress can fall if the person inside is sleeping. Around 2 a.m., the storm I had seen on the horizon finally arrived. It wasn't just a rain shower. It was a true Texas gully washer. Thunder rolled across the hills like heavy artillery, making the floorboards vibrate under my boots. I sat at the kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee, staring at the muted screen of my phone. I had turned off the GPS and the cellular data, but I kept the device on just in case. A soft creak behind me made me reach for the heavy flashlight on the table. I didn't turn it on, but I gripped it like a weapon. Andres, are you still up? It was Erica. She was wearing an oversized flannel shirt she must have found in the guest closet. Her hair was messy and she looked exhausted. In the faint light of a lightning flash, she didn't look like the CEO who could fire 100 people without blinking. She looked like someone who was drowning and had finally found a piece of driftwood to hang on to. I can't sleep, she said, pulling a chair out and sitting across from me. Every time I close my eyes, I see Lucas's face. I see the way he looked at me on the beach. It wasn't love, Andres. It was like he was looking at a piece of equipment that had stopped working properly. I set the flashlight down. Control is a powerful drug for men like him, I told her. He doesn't want you back because he misses you. He wants you back because he can't stand the idea of you being outside of his reach. Erica leaned forward, resting her chin on her hands. He told me once that I was his greatest investment. I thought it was a compliment at the time. I was so blind. By the time I realized he was using his company to build a surveillance network, I was already trapped. He has files on everyone, senators, judges, even the board of our company. That's why nobody helps me. They're all afraid of what he has in those digital vaults. I looked at her, my heart heavy with a mix of anger and sympathy. And you have the keys to those vaults? I have the master encryption codes, she whispered. I copied them onto a drive before I ran. If I can get that drive to the right people in the federal government, his entire empire collapses. But he's tracked every phone I've had. He has private investigators and retired cops on his payroll. I don't know how he found me today, but I know he won't stop. She paused, looking toward the hallway where Clara was sleeping. I'm so sorry I brought this to your house. If anything happens to your daughter because of me, nothing is going to happen to her. I interrupted. My voice was harder than I intended, but the thought of Clara being in danger was the only thing that could still make me feel true fear. I've spent 3 years trying to keep her world perfect. I've lived like a ghost so she could have a normal life. I'm not going to let a man like Lucas Cole take that away. Erica reached across the table, her hand hovering near mine. She didn't touch me, but I could feel the heat radiating from her skin. Why did you stop? The military, you were good at it, weren't you? I looked away, staring into the darkness of the living room. I was very good at it. Maybe too good. But when Sarah got sick, everything changed. I realized that while I was away protecting interests and assets, the person who mattered most was fighting a war on her own in a hospital bed. When she died, I promised her I would never leave Clara. I promised I would be the most boring, safe, predictable dad in the world. You're not boring, Andres, Erica said softly. You're the only person who hasn't looked at me like a paycheck or a problem in 3 years. We sat in silence for a long time, listening to rain hammer against the metal roof. For the first time since the beach, the tension in the room wasn't about the men following us. It was about the two of us. I had spent so long being just Clara's dad, or the marketing guy, that I had forgotten what it felt like to be seen as a man. The silence was broken by a sudden, sharp vibration. It wasn't my phone. It was coming from Erica's purse on the counter. She went pale. I turned it off. I took the battery out of the old one and threw the other one away. I walked over and opened her bag. Inside, tucked into a hidden side pocket I hadn't noticed earlier, was a small silver device. It was a high-end GPS tracker, the kind that didn't need a phone signal to work. It was pulsing with a tiny, rhythmic blue light. My blood went cold. How long has this been in here? I don't know, she stammered. Lucas gave me that bag for my birthday last month. I haven't used any other purse since then. I didn't waste another second. I took the tracker, walked to the back door, and threw it as far as I could into the woods. But I knew it was too late. If that thing had been active, Lucas didn't need to follow my truck. He already had the coordinates to this ranch. We need to move, I said, my voice switching back to command tone. Get your shoes on. Wake Clara up, but don't scare her. Tell her we're going to play a game of quiet campers. Erica didn't argue. She saw the look in my eyes and knew the marketing specialist was gone for good. I went to the closet in the hallway and pulled out a heavy wooden box from under a pile of old blankets. I hadn't opened it since the day of Sarah's funeral. Inside was my old service pistol, 3 spare magazines, and a tactical vest. I didn't want to use them. I had prayed I would never have to touch them again. But as I checked the slide and felt the cold weight of the steel in my hand, I realized that my routine hadn't been a shield. It had been a cage. And to keep my daughter safe, I had to break out of it. I heard Clara's sleepy voice in the hallway, asking Erica why they were up so early. I took a deep breath, tucked the pistol into the small of my back, and went to meet them. "Hey, princess," I said, kneeling down at Clara's level and giving her a smile that I hoped looked real. "We're going to move to a different room for a bit. It's like a fort, okay? We have to be very, very quiet so we can win the game." Clara rubbed her eyes and nodded, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Is Erica playing too?" "Erica is on our team," I said, looking up at my boss. She looked back at me, her eyes wide but determined. She saw the gun tucked into my waistband, but she didn't look away. For the first time, she wasn't just a CEO hiding behind an employee. She was a partner. I led them to the basement, a reinforced concrete room that doubled as a storm cellar. I gave them a flashlight and some water. "Stay here. Don't open this door unless you hear me say the code word, sunflower. Do you understand?" Erica nodded, gripping Clara's hand. "Andres, please be careful." "I'm not the one who should be worried," I said as I closed the heavy steel door. I walked back up to the kitchen and stood in the dark. Through the window, I saw the flash of headlights bouncing down the long, muddy driveway. 2 sets of lights. Lucas had arrived, and he hadn't come for a conversation. I gripped my weapon and waited. The quiet life was over. The single dad was gone. The soldier was back. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My dad said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show him that these tales matter. Please subscribe to this channel, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now let's continue. The rain was coming down so hard now that the world outside the limestone walls looked like a blurred gray sheet. The headlights of the 2 SUVs sliced through the downpour, their beams swinging wildly as the vehicles bounced over the muddy ruts of my driveway. I stood in the center of the dark kitchen, my breathing slow and rhythmic. I didn't feel like the marketing specialist anymore. I didn't feel like the grieving widower. Every nerve in my body had shifted back to the cold, calculated readiness of a soldier. I watched as the vehicles came to a stop about 30 yards from the house. They were smart. They didn't pull right up to the porch where I could ambush them easily. Doors creaked open against the wind, and figures began to emerge. I counted 4 men, plus a 5th who moved with a different kind of posture, stiff, arrogant, and impatient. Even through the rain and the dark, I knew it was Lucas Cole. He wasn't staying in the car like a coward. He wanted to be there when they broke Erica. He wanted to see her face when he took back his property. I moved away from the window. In the basement, Eric and Clara were behind a steel door, but I knew that if Lucas's men had enough time, they could find a way through it. My job wasn't just to hide them. It was to make sure these men never got that far. A heavy thud echoed through the house as someone kicked the front door. The limestone walls didn't shudder, but the wood groaned. "Erica!" Lucas's voice carried over the thunder, amplified by some kind of megaphone or just the sheer force of his rage. "I know you're in there, and I know you're with the help. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Just give me the drive, and we can all go home." I didn't answer. Silence is a weapon. It forces the enemy to wonder what you're doing. It makes them nervous. Another kick, harder this time. Then the sound of glass shattering in the mudroom. They were moving to the back. I ghosted through the hallway, my socks silent on the hardwood floors. I reached the mudroom door, just as a gloved hand reached through the broken window pane to turn the lock. I didn't use my gun. Not yet. I grabbed the wrist, twisted it sharply, and heard the satisfying pop of the joint being forced out of place. A man screamed outside, a sound quickly swallowed by a roar of thunder. I shoved him back through the window and bolted the heavy inner door. "He's armed," the man yelled to his teammates. Now they knew. The boring dad was fighting back. A flurry of footsteps sounded on the wraparound porch. They were circling. I knew this house better than anyone, and I knew that the old hunting lodge had one major weakness: the cellar vents. If they threw gas down there, Erica and Clara would be forced out. I had to end this before they realized that. I headed to the living room, where the large windows looked out over the porch. I saw a shadow move past. I stepped into the frame, letting them see me for a split second. A flash of light erupted from the darkness. A muzzle flash. The glass shattered, and I dropped to the floor, glass shards raining down on my back. They were shooting. This wasn't just a retrieval mission anymore. It was an execution. "Lucas!" I shouted, staying low and moving toward the corner of the room. "You come onto my land, you threaten my daughter, and you think you're walking away? You got 5 seconds to turn those trucks around before I stop being polite." A mocking laugh came from the driveway. "You're a marketing guy, Andres. You sell apps and social media campaigns. You're out of your league. Men, take the house." 2 men charged the front door with a battering ram they must have brought from the truck. The wood splintered with a deafening crack. I popped up from behind the sofa, leveled my service pistol, and fired 2 shots. I didn't aim to kill, not yet, but I caught the lead man in the shoulder. He spun around, dropping the ram, and scrambled back into the rain. The second man raised a submachine gun, but I was already moving. I dived behind a stone fireplace as a spray of bullets tore through my late wife's favorite armchair. The sight of the fabric shredding filled me with a cold, white-hot fury. This house was my sanctuary. It was all I had left of Sarah, and they were tearing it apart. "Enough," I whispered. I navigated through the kitchen and out the side laundry door, slipping into the freezing rain. The mud was thick and slick, but I knew the terrain. I circled around the back of the house, using the dense oak tree for cover. I saw the 2 men near the porch, trying to find another way in. Lucas was still by the SUVs, shielded by the open door of the lead vehicle. I crept up behind the man who had been shooting at the windows. He was reloading, his fingers fumbling with a magazine in the wet cold. I didn't give him a chance. I stepped out of the shadows and brought the butt of my pistol down on the back of his neck. He went down like a sack of stones. 1 left on the porch, 2 by the cars. I took the down man's radio. "Lucas," I said into the receiver, "that's 3 down. You're running out of muscle." I saw Lucas jump, looking around frantically. He grabbed his own radio. "Find him. He's outside. Kill him." The last man on the porch panicked. He started firing blindly into the trees, his muzzle flashes lighting up the rain like strobe lights. He was terrified. A terrified man is an easy target. I waited for his rhythm to break. Then I fired a single shot. It hit the railing right next to his hand, and he scrambled off the porch, sprinting toward the woods. He was done. He wasn't getting paid enough to die in a Texas storm. Now it was just Lucas and his lead driver. I walked out into the open, the rain soaking through my shirt, my pistol held at my side. I didn't hide. I wanted him to see me. "It's over, Lucas," I called out. The wind was whipping my hair across my face, but my eyes never left the SUV. "The police are 10 minutes out." I triggered the silent alarm at the gate the second you drove over it. I was lying about the police. The storm had knocked out the phone lines and the gate sensor, but Lucas didn't know that. He looked at the dark road behind him, then back at me. His face was twisted with a mix of fear and hatred. "You think you won?" Lucas screamed. "I own this state. I'll buy the judge, I'll buy the prison, and then I'll come back here and burn this shack to the ground with you inside it." He reached into the SUV, and for a second, I thought he was grabbing a weapon. I raised my gun, my finger tightening on the trigger. But he didn't pull out a gun. He pulled out a laptop. "I'm uploading the files now, Andres. I've got a satellite uplink. By the time your police get here, the evidence Erica stole will be wiped, and the people I've been spying on will get an alert that she was the one who did it. She'll be the traitor, not me." I saw the blue glow of the screen. He was serious. If he hit that button, everything Erica had sacrificed would be for nothing. I didn't think. I fired. The bullet didn't hit Lucas. It hit the laptop screen, shattering the electronics in a spray of sparks. Lucas shrieked, dropping the ruined device into the mud. He stared at it, then at me, his mouth hanging open. "That was my only copy," he whimpered. "No," I said, stepping closer until the barrel of my gun was inches from his chest. "Erica has the copy, and now you have nothing." The driver tried to move, but I shifted my aim to him. "Don't," I said. It was a simple word, but it carried the weight of a man who had seen enough death for 3 lifetimes. The driver put his hands up and stepped away from the car. I forced Lucas and the driver to sit in the mud, their hands zip-tied with the emergency ties I kept in my tactical vest. I stood over them, the rain finally beginning to let up as the distant sound of real sirens began to wail in the distance. Erica must have found a way to call them. Or maybe the neighbors a mile down the road had heard the gunfire. I walked back to the house, my boots heavy with mud. I went to the basement door and knocked. "Sunflower," I said, my voice cracking with exhaustion. The bolt slid back, and the door swung open. Erica stood there, holding a wide-eyed Clara. When Erica saw me, bloody, soaked, but standing, she let out a sob and practically fell into me. I caught them both, pulling them into a tight circle. "Is the game over, Daddy?" Clara asked, her voice small against my chest. I looked over her head at Erica, who was looking at me with a look of pure, unfiltered gratitude. I realized then that the silence I had lived in for 3 years wasn't peace. It was just a long breath I had been holding. "Yeah, Princess," I said, kissing the top of her head. "The game is over. We won." The morning after the storm, the Texas sun rose over the hill country as if it were trying to apologize for the night before. The air was crisp, and the sky was a deep, endless blue. But as I stepped out onto the porch, the reality of the battle was everywhere. The mud was churned up by heavy tires. The front door was a splintered mess of wood, and the limestone walls were scarred where bullets had grazed them. The police had arrived just as the sun began to peek over the horizon. They had taken Lucas Cole and his driver away in handcuffs. The men I had knocked out were loaded into ambulances under heavy guard. Because of Erica's position and the high-profile nature of Lucas's tech empire, the Texas Rangers had been called in to handle the scene. I stood by the railing, watching the investigators mark evidence. I felt a light touch on my arm. It was Erica. She had managed to shower and change into a pair of my old sweatpants and a t-shirt. She looked exhausted. But for the first time since I had known her, the Ice Queen mask was completely gone. Her eyes were clear, and the tension in her shoulders had finally melted away. "The Rangers just finished talking to me," she said softly. "They have the drive. They've already confirmed that the data on it is enough to put Lucas away for decades. It's not just the spying, it's the bribery and the extortion. He's never coming back, Andres. I nodded, looking out at the woods. Good. He shouldn't have brought that poison to this house. He didn't just bring poison, Erica countered, moving to stand in front of me. He brought the truth out. I spent years thinking I had to be perfect and untouchable to be successful. And you spent 3 years thinking you had to be a ghost to be a good father. We were both hiding in different kind of offices. She was right. I had used my grief for Sarah as a reason to stop living. I had told myself that a quiet life was what Clara needed, but really, I was just afraid of losing someone else. Watching Erica stand up to Lucas, even when she was terrified, had reminded me that life isn't about avoiding the storm. It's about who you stand with when it hits. A small voice interrupted us. Daddy? Is the game really over? Clara was standing in the doorway, clutching her rabbit. She looked at the broken door and the police cars with wide eyes. I walked over and picked her up, tucking her head into the crook of my neck. Yes, princess, the game is over. We're safe now. And guess what? We're going to get a brand new door. Maybe a blue one this time. Clara giggled. I like blue. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings and corporate chaos. As soon as the news broke about Lucas Cole's arrest, the board of our marketing firm went into a panic. They tried to distance themselves from him, but Erica wouldn't let them off easy. She used her remaining influence to clean house, firing the executives who had looked the other way while Lucas operated in the shadows. I expected to be fired, too. After all, a marketing specialist who gets into a gunfight at his private ranch isn't exactly brand safe. But during the first board meeting after the scandal, Erica sat at the head of the table and made it very clear that I was the reason the company still existed at all. Andres Mode is staying, she had said, her voice echoing in the glass-walled room. And if anyone has a problem with his conduct, they could discuss it with my legal team. Nobody said a word. However, the office didn't feel the same anymore. The fluorescent lights and the endless spreadsheets felt small compared to the life-and-death reality we had faced in the hill country. One Friday afternoon, about a month after siege, I found Erica in her office. She wasn't looking at a monitor. She was looking at a photo of the Texas coast on her wall. I'm resigning, Andres, she said without turning around. I stopped in my tracks. You won, Erica. You have total control of the firm now. Why leave? She turned to face me, a small smile on her lips. I realized I don't want to run a giant machine anymore. I want to build something that actually helps people. I'm starting a nonprofit to help victims of digital stalking and corporate abuse. I want to use my money for something that matters. She walked toward me, stopping just a few inches away. But I realized something else, too. I don't want to do it alone. I need someone who knows how to handle a crisis. Someone who isn't afraid of the dark. Erica, I'm just a dad from Texas. I said, though my heart was starting to beat faster. No, she said, reaching up to touch my cheek. You're the man who stood in the rain to protect me. You're the man who showed me that I don't have to be the boss all the time. I'm not asking you to be my employee, Andres. I'm asking you to be my partner in everything. I looked at her, and for the first time in 3 years, I didn't think about Sarah's empty chair or the silence of my house. I thought about the way Erica had held Clara's hand in the basement. I thought about the way she looked at the beach when she had nowhere else to turn. I'd like that, I whispered. We didn't go back to the ranch right away. Instead, we went back to where it all started. A few days later, we were back on the Texas coast. The sun was warm, and the Gulf was a peaceful shade of turquoise. Clara was down by the water, trying to chase seagulls, her laughter carrying over the sound of the waves. Erica and I sat on a large blanket. There were no suited men in the dunes, no black SUVs in the parking lot. There was just the wind and the sun. Erica leaned over and rested her head on my shoulder. You know, she said quietly, when I sat on your lap that day, I was just looking for a place to hide. I didn't think I'd find a home. I wrapped my arm around her, pulling her close. Sometimes the best things happen when you're just trying to survive the day. I looked down at the hand that wasn't holding Erica. For the first time since the funeral, I wasn't wearing my wedding ring. I hadn't thrown it away. It was safe in a box at home, a memory of a beautiful chapter that had ended. But my hand felt light. It felt ready to hold something new. "Look, Daddy, I found a big one," Clara shouted, running up to us with a giant conch shell. She dropped into Erica's lap and climbed up between us. We sat there, the three of us, watching the tide come in. My life wasn't quiet anymore. It wasn't steady or predictable. It was loud, it was complicated, and it was a little bit dangerous. But as the sun began to set over the Texas water, I realized I wouldn't trade it for all the routines in the world. The Ice Queen had found her heart. The soldier had found his peace, and the single dad had finally found a reason to stop living in the past. The story that started with a desperate lie on a beach had become the truest thing I had ever known. We weren't just pretending anymore. We were home. The story teaches us that while routine and isolation can feel like a shield against the pain of the past, true healing only begins when we find the courage to be vulnerable again. Andre spent years living as a ghost to protect himself and his daughter from the world's chaos. Yet it took a high-stakes crisis to reveal that his greatest strength lay in his ability to protect and connect with others. Ultimately, the lesson is that we cannot truly find safety by hiding. We find it by building meaningful partnerships and facing life's storms with people who give us a reason to stop simply surviving and start living. So here's the real question. Did you subscribe yet? Thousands of people will listen to this story and won't subscribe. Please don't be that person. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My dad said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show him that these tales matter. Please subscribe to this channel, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. And here's what I need to know. Do you want part 2?